Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. I want to begin by asking you to maybe close your eyes. Imagine. Oh, this is great. No, please. Did anybody order this?
Imagine we have a table.
So close your eyes, ignore the furniture moving, and cast your mind back to maybe 1831. And I want to imagine that we are now in an English, I think we'll need 3. Thank you. I want you to imagine that we're now in an English country house in around about 1831. And should we just let this happen? And, it's an English country house in 1831, and Sir Robert Peel has just become the new British Prime Minister. And Sir Robert Peel had made his money out on the land. You know, that was the way people made their money in those days. They were landowners, and he'd made his money that way. And apparently, and I wasn't there, obviously, but apparently one day he was musing, not long after he came into office, and he was musing. You can just see him musing. And he said, you know, we might prefer that England remained a country of cornfields on moral and social grounds, rather than a country of cotton mills. But he said, the die is cast, the future is set, we cannot recede. And I can sort of imagine, I don't know when it would have been, maybe recently, a council meeting in Europe where Chancellor Merkel, the other prime ministers of Europe were gathered together, and they might have similarly mused, the future is digital, the die is cast, we cannot recede. But then they might have said to themselves, who's going to lead this digital change? Who's going to take this forward? And that's what we're going to be talking about in this panel this morning. So I'm John Higgins. I'm the Director General of Digital Europe. It's like a Bitcom on a European basis. I also have been leading for the European Commission a piece of work on the digital transformation of Europe's industry and enterprises. What can we do to accelerate it? What are the barriers in the way? And it's my great pleasure to moderate this half an hour or so panel and a discussion with 2 fantastic panelists. So Claudia Nemat on your left, my right, is a board member of Deutsche Telekom. She's been in that role for 4 years or so. And but before that, a long career with McKinsey, looking at global technologies and technology-impacted change in business. So great to have you as part of our panel. Professor Gesche Joost is, well, she's the digital champion for Germany. You might not know that every country in Europe has a digital champion. You form quite a nicely tight-knit group of such people discussing how to advance Europe's digital prospects. And I think your day job is as a professor here in Berlin at the University of the Arts. So welcome to you both. So, Claudia, let me begin with you. Who's driving this digital revolution that we heard Vice President Ansip talking about?
So, John and everyone, good morning. I would say Europe has at least lost the first round. In the consumer area, we all know, software is mainly done in the States, hardware in China. And unlike Europe, the Chinese have managed to do their own new business models, like Alibaba. And what was said before, we had more difficulties in creating business models that do really scale fast. And very often, in the States, there is that mindset, we do not really bother about local laws. We believe we can change them anyhow. Yeah, whereas in Europe, we sometimes try to outsmart innovation by nitty-gritty regulation. But, as Dirk said, the journey isn't lost. Industry 4.0 is a trademark. That's great. And we have fantastic industrial tech, automotive, and embedded software. What do we need to do? Let me quote one of my heroes from my youth, as the movie is coming pretty soon again to the cinemas, Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back. So Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, there is this scene where Master Yoda tries to teach Luke Skywalker how to be a Jedi. And Luke is supposed to lift that X-Wing fighter from the swarms just by applying concentration and the Force. And Master Yoda says, do or do not. There is no try. By the way, for us, it would mean we need to do it not only intellectually, but full-heartedly, bold, and with passion. And in business, Gesche, I would say, and then if we don't manage, fail fast. Yeah, in the startups, and then try a new thing. And in order to get there, let me say, I believe quickly 3 things. Number 1, boldness. Number 2, even if I look around, we are too male, too functional, too German, too hierarchical, too much traditional command and control. And we need to learn, really, to work much more in flatter hierarchies, cross-gender, cross-functional, cross-countries, cross-everything, and embrace these modern styles to bring that together with the benefits which we have in the industrial age, to be really leading, or as Master Yoda says, how wonderful the mind of a child is, yeah, and to bring that into our knowledge.
Thank you very much, Claudia. What's your perception and your take on this, Gesche?
I love this, this metaphor of Master Yoda. I think Master Yoda is the guy who has to train the smart talents. So it's very much about educating everybody that digital is the new normal. It's nothing special. It's nothing completely weird or futuristic, but it's today. And Luke Skywalker is a small, medium-sized enterprise guy. So he's the driving force for the, I think, for the success of all of our big and really, I think, very innovative concepts of Industrie 4.0. This is very good direction. But if we don't get Luke Skywalker in, so the small, medium-sized enterprises, we won't lose, we will lose the game again. So I think that having a connection between these high-level concepts of standardization, of full networked processes, of logistics, of really thinking about how a networked world would look like, and having a connection to the layer of really everyday life experience of people in the small, medium-sized enterprises, that they understand that it's their future and it's their potential of making really good business success. That's a big challenge. So it's on the one hand side communication, but on the other hand side, it's a kind of low barrier access for small medium-sized enterprises of having, let's say, Industrie 4.0 as a service. So not, changing revolutionary their whole system from one day to the other, but having step-by-step smart components that they can integrate into their services. Maybe one example also. I'm working at my university. I'm working on wearable computing. So it's not just about Fitbits and all this kind of stuff that it's on the market already, but we are knitting wearable computers. So we are knitting jackets with sensors inside, with little microcontrollers. We are programming the apps for that, and so on. So on the research side, there's a lot there, but you don't find it in the shops. And I wonder why. I want to have a smart jacket, of course, because it's really very helpful through the day. It's cool, of course. It's innovative. But there we have the problem that there are so many different actors. So there's the garment company. There's the data analytics layer. There is the new business models that they can make sense of the big data or of the data that is emitted. There is, for example, a medical player who can, come up with new services for improving health conditions through wearable technology. And all these different actors have to come together and play the game of Industrie 4.0. And that's still the issue, how they can really come together, form a so-called Beutegemeinschaft, and coming up with really new concepts there and making those new concepts really come to life. And these are the small, medium-sized enterprises, the hidden champions also very much in Germany. They have the potential, but we have to get them on board.
Okay. So some very good points there. Can I just check, do we have the means to bring the audience in at some point in the next few minutes? So we can do that. So prepare your questions. So I mentioned in my introduction that I've been leading a piece of work for the Commission on identifying the barriers to and possible accelerations of this digital transformation. I mean, think broader than maybe the German area where there's not such an industrial base. In different parts of Europe, there are many different sorts of industries, service industries, financial industries, lots of small family businesses, maybe think about those in the north of Italy. So, you know, there's different challenges across Europe. And one thing I think I picked up from both of you was this need to break down the silos and the traditions. One of the examples that we saw in Ireland, in Dublin, was that the cities were becoming real hubs.
Yes.
And so and I thought the Irish have got Guinness and they've got ingenuity. I mean, you've got to hand it to them, haven't you? And what they were doing was they were pulling in the existing businesses, you know, the traditional small businesses, large businesses, and the sorts of companies that are here today at Hub, you know, the tech innovators, and they were bringing them together to try and break down some of these silos so they could learn from each other, so that they could maybe realize that they weren't different sorts of people at all, but had quite similar business challenges. I mean, what do you think of that as a model and, you know, this idea of cities or hubs?
Yes.
Would that be a way of breaking down some of that?
I think that's one big part of that. And I do see that not only in Ireland, but also in Eastern Europe, for example, in Budapest and Dubrovnik, where around smart city and being the hub of connecting citizens, this idea comes alive. Yeah? Even to the extent when you look at a city like Singapore, that there are new architectural concepts, yeah, marketplaces, real marketplaces and digital marketplaces, so that this new way of living becomes really more visible, and that sharing economy around virtual marketplaces, real marketplaces, creates those communities. I believe that is one important factor of bringing forward that idea.
I think also to elaborate on this, so the idea of labs also is very much common now. For example, in Berlin, there are so many big companies who want to create innovation labs. That means they step out of their company, out of their big, you know, meta level housing building silo, let's say, and mingle with innovators, with makers, with different people, with citizens, and then become much more creative. So Berlin is one of these lab cities, but also, as you said, different other ones. So Budapest, Barcelona is this city of living labs. This is a wonderful concept also of bringing very different people in, because I see a lot of disconnection between the startup scene, the makers scenes, who just, you know, tinker around with technology and come up with the greatest ideas. It's totally far beyond every kind of company structure of any institutional level, but it's really the very decentralized spaces where things happen. And this is a great potential for Europe, I guess, because we have those wonderful people, we have those wonderful cities, and we have to bring those people together.
And I guess you have these conversations with your fellow digital champions across Europe as well, and look at these different models. When we were doing this work I just described to you, one of the things we did was look at what are the underlying characteristics of these hubs and in different cities. And maybe surprisingly, what we found was that one of the things in London that had caused Tech City to be the place it is now, you know, all this Tech City in the west of London, in the east of London, was government intervention, a really strong drive by the British government to drive people towards it. In contrast, in Berlin, the government was pretty out of the picture. This was very private sector driven. So do you think there's a, you know, what should governments and public sector, maybe even the European policymakers do? Do you think they should just back off and leave it to the private sector to get on with it, or do they have a role to play? What's your view on that?
It's a good question. I think that the driving forces is the decentralized, is the community, is the crowd, is also the private sector, but the government has to then support it. So, you know, if you find, for example, in Berlin, there are really many big companies like SAP, like Adidas, like Lego, like Telekom, like very different ones, who come together and want to form, you know, a new innovation ecosystem. And they have the potential, they have the people, they have the community, but then, you know, the city and the government has to come and set or support the framework, find the best rooms, you know, have a vision for the city. And this, I think, is the interplay. I think it shouldn't be a top-down approach, but very much bottom-up approach, but then hand in hand.
But they should be hand in hand. That's the thing. They should be part of the square.
Exactly, I would agree. And I think any barrier should be removed. And we have a lot of barriers between the countries in Europe because we are always one country by another country, so we don't yet have a single market. That needs to be removed. Would be a great task for the governments to do. And yes, as you said, basically support and not create unnecessary nitty-gritty regulation on certain things, which sometimes really inhibit small businesses, but also large businesses to do things fast. Yeah.
Torsten sort of referred to that in his opening remarks, didn't he? Where he said 1 comma in the general data protection regulation can make all the difference between. I mean,
yes.
How do you see the role? You must talk about this when you're with your European colleagues. How do you see the role of the European institutions in this, the Commission and maybe Parliament, and also the countries when they come together on a European-wide basis in their council meetings? How do you see the sort of European angle on this, Claudia?
So I believe driving conviction and bringing down barriers to any travel of digital goods, enforcing a single market and a digital agenda, I see that as a very big task. Reality is often very different. For example, in Deutsche Telekom, we are currently trying to build a pan-European network. By the way, also good for all smaller businesses in the countries. And what you cannot imagine, every single country has completely different rules with regard to security data protection and legal intervention of services.
Yeah.
That's a huge disadvantage, because also very small businesses nowadays work very quickly across borders. And I see them driving down these barriers.
I think, you know, when I talk to, I mean, if we talk to Vice President Ansip or others who are in leadership roles, or you heard it in his speech as well, the main drive is the single market in the digital world, which is, you know, the digital single market, but also the broader single market in the digital world. And often, I think the barriers are different member states who, you know, like all of us, you know, I'd love a single market as long as it's using my rules.
Exactly.
That would be great. Thank you very much. So, you know, a lot of the time it is the member states who have trouble breaking down these barriers.
Absolutely. I want to break down silos as long as my own silo becomes the dominant paradigm for the other silos.
Exactly. Listen, it's opportunity for maybe a broader discussion with some of you. Anybody want to make an intervention or ask a question or take us in a particular direction? At all? No, Bernard Rollard had told me you were a very lively audience, so I think that's true, isn't it, Bernard? You know, the audience here really, you said at this hub conference, people really like to get stuck in, so you've got he set an expectation here, ladies and gentlemen. I'm expecting you to come in here with some good, it's very dark, some very good interventions.
Maybe they still need the second coffee, huh?
Then maybe that's it. Are they all usually very shy here then, Gesche? Yeah, I think so. I think.
Maybe until the first question, maybe I can say also one very good point about also the European policy is this idea of an open education system.
Yes.
So this is the training on the job, the skill training is a crucial factor also for getting, like, let's say, digital Europe a success. Yeah. And the European vision on that is really that not just the single companies do their own training programs and training ecosystem, but that they open up the ecosystem. And it's not not reality yet, because every big company says, oh, we have our skill set here and we do the training, but having it as an open source ecosystem, open educational resources, this is a very good approach, I guess. And there's the big platform, the big online university, Udacity, they offer, for example, nano degrees. And that's very interesting. So this is the concept that different companies like Google, AT&T and other ones, they offer certified courses, like for example, become data analyst in 4 weeks or something, and that's called a nano degree. And that you can have as building blocks in an open ecosystem of skill training. And this is a very good also European vision, that we share our expertises on digital skills and not having it as the silos again, but really leveraging the potential there. And,
in this work that we did on barriers and accelerators, I wasn't particularly going to report it, but it might be worth noting that we identified 4 main themes, right? And it's interesting that we've already touched on 2 of them. So the 4 main themes were leadership, first of all, both political and business leadership, because this digital transition is not taken on lightly, is it? I mean, when I talked to some of the innovators here at the speakers' dinner last night, you know, these people were passionate leaders who wanted to develop some change. So you need that sort of, first of all, the leadership and the political leadership. You need political leadership that's saying it's good to go digital. That's our economic future. So I think that, and I think as digital champions, you have a big part to play in that. I think the idea of smart cities and breaking down the silos was a second theme. The third theme was very much around the skills for the future, both the e-leadership skills, but the skills in the workforce. I was at a conference recently with entrepreneurs in Brussels, and I said to them, who wants to change the world? You know, I thought it was an easy question, really. And of course, lots of hands went up. Yeah. And I said, and how many of you think the world wants to be changed? And not many hands went up, because, you know, so you have to take people with you on this transition. Otherwise, you have taxi drivers in the street, or you have, you have all the resistors to change if you don't take them with you. So I think the digital skills in the population, in the workforce was one. And then a fourth theme was regulation and policy making fit for a digital age, not regulations that are crafted for the time when Robert Peel was in his dining room in the English countryside, but rather things that recognize the opportunities for personalized medicine. So, you know, I think it's interesting we're touching upon all of those themes. But anybody, yes, we have one here, please. I think introduce yourself, and that would be great. I think if you start speaking, perhaps the microphone will come to life, I hope. No? Yeah, we'll try loudly, and I'll repeat it. It's coming on now.
Now it's coming, okay.
Yeah.
So since over a decade now in the digital space here in Berlin, founded several companies and initiated one of the first corporate incubators for the Scout 24 group already in 2010. So my question would be, I mean, you were perfectly right to say that Industry 4.0 is probably our last chance to profit from that digitalization. So where would you go to meet, on a global perspective, the most relevant Industry 4.0 startups?
Okay, where would you go on a global basis to meet the most relevant Industry 4.0 startup? You're here in Berlin, isn't it? It's the obvious answer. But we'll see if are there any other questions anybody wants to come into? Yeah, there's one here, sir. I don't know if you have to go to a microphone or shout or... Yeah, perfect, thank you, yes.
Well, my name is Axel Haas. I'm representing a German company from Munich who is on the way to be world market leader in messaging services, a company called Retaros in Munich. Many of you, most of you might be users of this company. My question is the following. You might have heard and read in the newspaper that the German heroes in car production, Daimler, BMW, Audi, they have bought a company called HERE. This is, might be the most important company in map designing and navigation. And coming to this question, who will be the driving force in the digital market in Europe? From the point of view of Germany, these are the outstanding companies of our industry. The German car industry is the most important industry in the German market. And these three companies have taken over here. And this is, the focus of the new digitalization. Everybody, we were talking about how cars are being used in the German cities. I would presume that this company, unfortunately, I have no stake in this company, but I would presume this company here and the three German car producers, they will be of the biggest effect in the digitalization in the European market. Could you share this, or you have other ideas where the market will go to? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Two very good questions. Here, of course, I think it was a Nokia company, wasn't it, that got acquired. So do you have a view on those questions?
So, yes. By the way, I really do hope that that combination can be one of the big shapers around Industry 4.0 in the automotive scheme. And that links also to the previous question, where to look for. I believe here it will be very relevant when large companies that are incredibly good at something, like our traditional automotive companies, and such smaller, not so small in the meantime anymore, tech companies go together and co-shape. Because here it is the combination of the activities of BMW, Mercedes, Bosch, Siemens, Telekom, and companies that have a specific technology know-how. And when you ask who can drive and lead that, I believe it is the combination, in this case, between the traditional companies that have the distribution channels, the branding power, the engineering powers, and those who disrupt from outside. And unlike in the B2C arena, if that comes together, this can be a tremendous shaping force, I believe.
Well,
and to the first question, it's a very good question, because it's not the answer that Berlin is the city where I would see the Industry 4.0 startup leaders, but it's the countryside, it's Baden-Württemberg, it's Bayern. So it's really those hidden champions that do greatest innovations, but they don't talk much about it. So it's really that getting them on board and getting their ideas on board. And I was recently visiting here in Berlin the Bundesdruckerei, and that's very interesting. When I thought, they are printing money and that's it, but no, of course not. They are doing, of course, our digital ID cards and our passports, and this is a fully implemented Industrie 4.0 Produktionsstraße. It's amazing how the data transition from the local government with all the data, with the address details, the name, the photography and everything is kind of connected in this production line for this single piece of ID card, and then automatically shipped to every individual person. And it takes just, a week or something until the whole process is done. So really those who are not very present on stage, but who really do the everyday life experience in Industry 4.0, these are the interesting parts. This is the first part of the answer. The second, very shortly, when I Googled IoT accelerator, because I'm very interested in IoT, then the only hits that I got were from Silicon Valley. And I was really like, that's impossible. It cannot be that we don't have in Europe any kind of really strong IoT acceleration program. There are some starting in Berlin, but not the big ones.
Well,
and that's like,
go to CeBIT and go and ask how many IoT platforms there are just there. You see. Well, I guess this year will be, I bet we're into 250 this year.
Which is some part of the topic. So therefore, I believe in this one. It will not be only the cities or the many mid-sized companies, the tech startups in Berlin, nor the traditional companies. Unless we figure out an avenue to disrupt, as leaders also of large companies, that business, and combine it with that tech know-how. Again, we will not be able to speed to scale, because then we have a lot of things, but in the end, this is also about a winner takes almost all.
Yeah.
And therefore, for me, the interesting question is how to disrupt, and what is the contribution of smaller companies to help us disrupt the traditional thinking of the institutions that can have the power in combination to shape that. And maybe just a practical thing here, my own experience coming in Deutsche Telekom with a somewhat culture shock 4 years ago was like this. You had to take the rebels from inside. People from Palo Alto, from technology in Bonn and Darmstadt, from vendors, from startups, put them in a place and let them build something and protect them for a while. And if it works, you try it out in a different country, and if it then works, you scale it up. And in the meantime, you protect them from the majority who wants to drive them down. But it requires really leadership to make sure that the small and disruptive things can scale up for a certain time.
Yeah. Can I just check with our moderator? We're getting end signals here, but I think we've got a few minutes more to go. What should we... Have we got 5 more minutes or 3 more minutes? So we like the negotiation. Settle for 4. Should we settle for 4? I think we'll settle for 4. So anybody else want to come in? Anybody else want to come in with any thoughts while we've been talking about that? Let's just spend our next 4 minutes on the question that we've not been asking, but is often asked, and is often asked in Europe. When I went to the conference run by the French Business Association in Paris, MEDEF, there was a really quite a tough debate going on there. They coined this expression "gaffer." I don't know if you've heard this before, but it symbolizes sort of what you described at the beginning. I think American companies coming in and dominating the market, and half the audience took the view that if you said "gaffer," it was a mark of your sort of French patriotism, that you could say "gaffer" and spit on the floor, and then the other half was saying, no, actually, this is about, we're in a global world, get real. It's as important to attract global companies and be part of that. This is a debate that rages more in some countries in Europe than in others. Do you have a view on that? Because that might be what's a little bit hidden in the question in our title, who will be driving the global markets.
So reality is that, unfortunately, when people sense crisis, societies often tend to do this and get less open towards what is from the outside world. And when you see this, there is in many countries a movement towards the right-wing parties, which I find pretty alarming. I believe in the world we are living, the superior concept is the one which attracts the best talent from wherever and thinks openly around it and creates the best service and product for as many consumers and businesses as possible. I truly believe that this is the superior model, and therefore it's not about protecting things, but it's about being bold and opening up, but then scaling faster, and then look at the own interest in that.
And your thoughts on that?
I really agree, and I think that we as a society, we have one of the biggest challenges for the next years, and also starting today, is really opening up. Also, when we think about all the new citizens that come to us and live with us and will work with us, also embrace them and see, what's their potential and their ideas. So it's also, again, a kind of a game between those two layers. So the top-down, so the established big companies, they try to push their agenda through, and the kind of very decentralized, innovative people from very different countries, very mobile, very maybe also a bit averse against any kind of big institutions, big companies, who are very, independent and freely moving. And having these two layers really interweaving and coming together. And I think that this is a great potential also when we think about the new citizens that all come to us, getting them on board from bottom up and not from top down.
I spoke recently with the European trade unions, and of course the sort of relationship within the industrial structures here in Germany are very strong, and the German unions in this area are very strong. But they're very, very positive about the digital opportunities and want to take advantage of them as much as anyone else. So I think certainly the mechanisms here in Germany seem to be working well in taking that part of the community with you. It seems, when I think about this, I think a simple model in my mind is, when I was in Spain recently and I saw the way that they stopped the sheep escaping from the fields. I understood then what this English word hobbled meant. And it's where they tie one front leg to the opposite back leg. So, I know, it's horrible, isn't it? So they can't run, and they can't run away. And I sometimes think that, you know, the way Germany won the World Cup was not by hobbling the other teams. It actually won the World Cup just, I say this, it gives me great pain to say this as an Englishman, I have to say. But Germany won the World Cup just by being better than everyone else at the same game. And so I do think that if we want to be the masters in the digital era, just like we've been the masters in football, then maybe the way to do it is just be better than everyone else and take advantage of the assets that you both described at the beginning. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's time to say thank you very much to our panelists. I hope you've enjoyed this first panel and enjoy very much the rest of the day. Thank you to the two panelists. Thank you.
Thank you very much to John and Gesche and Claudia for that very lively debate. And thanks